Neom is a proposal for a city that's actually under construction to be housed entirely within a single 170-kilometer or 105-mile long line. But of course, a city can't just be contained within the strictest geometrical definition of a line, an infinitely long object with no width, depth, or curvature. Neom's other dimensions includes its width at 200 meters wide or 656 feet. That's about the width of a typical block here in Chicago. It's also 500 meters or 1,600 feet tall, and that's a bit taller than the Hancock Tower. And then it goes for 105 miles. That takes us all the way down here to a town called Hoopeston, Illinois. All this built volume is meant to house 9 million people, and that so happens to be about the same population as Chicago. Well, not the city of Chicago, rather the Chicago metropolitan area, which sprawls all the way into the neighboring states of Wisconsin and Indiana. About 9 million people live in this area, and it contains about 10,000 square miles or 26,000 square kilometers. That would be like taking the length of Neom and making an entire square out of it. That's the area, the Chicago metropolitan density that it would take to house the same amount of people that Neom proposes to do. So in one sense, the ambition of Neom is a welcome one, to take up less land than a sprawling city would take up. While I am certainly not advocating for this project, it's fraught with all sorts of problems. Innovation in the way that we think about cities and their design is urgently important. The world's population is expanding rapidly, and some argue that we can no longer just sit around and wait for cities to grow organically over long periods of time, like they always have. More importantly, now than ever, cities must be pre-planned, and they need to be built quickly and efficiently. Neom's chief advocate, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, claims that the new $500 billion city design is a reaction to the perception that today's global cities are not designed with people in mind. Since the Industrial Revolution, cities prioritized machines, cars, and factories over people. He also claimed if you have money, you should raise the bar and create something innovative and different. But a cursory look at the history and evolution of linear cities like Neom quickly reveals that they aren't a particularly new idea, and they are actually the epitome of urban design concepts that came out of the Industrial Revolution, despite claims otherwise. They are ultimately born from an attempt to rationalize urban planning and growth along transportation networks. Urban theorist Kevin Lynch went so far as to call linear cities the direct expression of machine values. They are the result of thinking of the city as a power station or an assembly line. To take the dehumanizing aspects of linear cities even further, Neom looks like what Timothy Morton would call a hyperobject, which are things that are massively distributed, very large relative to humans, whether directly manufactured by humans or not. Other examples include some buildings like Pencil Towers in New York, but also abstract things like climate change or all the plastic in our oceans. Hyperobjects have a significant impact on us humans, and we struggle to understand them. We discover that we are stuck in them. In this way, Neom as a hyperobject is a post-human architecture, a structure not designed for or even by humans really, but for and by objects much larger than us. In fact, Neom's advocates claim that artificial intelligence will be the beating heart of the city. Artificial intelligence will be central to many of the city's operations, including the healthcare system, which Neom bosses claim will add 10 years to a resident's life. The entire city is a machine for incubating humans. According to Peter Trummer, hyperobjects occur when humans design buildings according to conditions that they themselves have created, but seem to have lost control over, so these phenomena have gained a certain amount of autonomy. Neom appears a lot like a vanity project, and it may be closer to, say, a Las Vegas casino or the Palm Island city than it is really viable urbanism. So judging it on, traditional urban planning principles might be more of a moot point. But I'm interested in how cities are designed from scratch. And the question remains, why don't we build line cities? Well, I think reason number one is what we just talked about, because they're not made by or for people. Historically, they are the result of designing a city like you would a machine. At first glance, linear cities seem like a great option. They offer the promise of efficient transportation networks, reduced reliance on cars, and the ability to house a larger population within a smaller land area. However, despite their potential advantages, we don't have a lot of linear cities strung across the globe. But that doesn't mean there's a lack of proposals out there or that they don't exist at all. For instance, the very first linear city concept was a plan for the expansion of Madrid by Arturo Soria y Mata in the late 19th century. This design was about 400 meters wide. It's about double Neom. It has ribbons of buildings on either side of the central avenue for cars and a train. This artery would also carry other services like sewage and electricity. The design would cut through the countryside, putting people closer to nature and encouraging agriculture. And the lack of intersections would reduce congestion and improve traffic flow. It would also be easier to provide public transportation, as the linear layout would allow for the creation of dedicated lanes to mass transit. The entire proposal was for a total of 50 kilometers in length, but only 5 kilometers was built. The idea was, as the city expanded, additional sectors would be added to the end of each band so that the city would become ever longer without growing any wider. Well, this sounds pretty radical, and it was at the time. When you look at the area that was developed according to these principles as it looks today, you'd be pretty hard-pressed to find the original line. It's here. Its camouflage within the greater city around it indicates a couple things to me. Firstly, we kind of already have important linear streets and corridors in all of our cities, and the implementation of Soria's design doesn't quite make it to the scale of something that we call a city today. Lines work well in cities, not as cities. But also, the city didn't really grow according to the linear mandate. The city consumed the linear part and absorbed the entire development within its larger fabric. That's one place where urban theorist Kevin Lynch's criticism of linear cities lies. This is also reason number 2 for why linear indoor cities don't work. They don't grow evenly. Lynch says, the supposed flexibility of the linear form is chimerical, since change without displacement can only occur at the remote ends of the line, or right angles to it. That all destroys the linearity. Thus, one activity cannot grow faster than another, unless its neighbor declines with equal speed. It is in fact very difficult to keep development from accreting along the edges, which are so close to good access. Nevertheless, linear cities inspired all kinds of modern thinkers and designers across the globe, people like Le Corbusier even. This passion also made its way to Russia, with people developing radically new socialist cities like Mikhail Akhtitovich and Nikolai Alexandrovich Miliutin, who developed the Strip City. You also have Ivan Leonidov's proposal for the town of Magnitogorsk. In the central strip of the design of this city are the residential buildings, glass towers, alternated to low-rise structures located in the green belt, all detached from one another in order to provide the maximum access to air and light. All of these examples are like normal cities with buildings separated by spaces just arranged within a single line. And this is how the original Neom design started, before it was proposed as a giant structure. But pooling everything into a big linear building isn't particularly new either, with the earliest examples being a proposal to stretch across the entire United States with a single building in 1910. It was called Road Town, and was the dream of Edgar Chambliss. The goal is for this city to span from New York City to San Francisco. One single line, the width of an average house, stretching across the entire country. This idea was so influential at the time that Thomas Edison donated his patent for single-pour concrete houses as a method to be able to construct, and William H. Boyles donated his patent for monorail design. But this brings us to the next criticism that's levied toward linear cities, and that's the diminishing return on efficient movement. Road Town is like a highway, and to keep things moving, you can't have too many stops along the way, or it'll slow everything down. So you end up needing to have different networks dedicated to local traffic versus the high-speed ones. While the entire city is arranged for that one line of efficient movement, actual movement is always so linear. While Road Town was a dream for a new city design, many others have been proposed as pragmatic solutions to existing conditions. A good example of this is the Linear City project by Peter Eisenman and Michael Graves. Their proposal was to connect various cities on the west coast of the United States with parallel strips, one of them for industry and the other for housing, offices, and stores. All of these proposals lack urban centers. Instead, they rely on pre-existing cities to be able to provide them. This is our next reason for why linear cities don't work. Urban centers are important psychologically, and urban cities don't have them. To be in a city without a center makes us feel lost and uncomfortable. Linear cities started to really fall out of favor and were the subject of intense criticisms during the 1970s, and some of these criticisms came in the form of mock proposals, which were dystopian visions, clearly disguised as beautiful images. This is Superstudio's continuous monument, represented as enigmatic collages of gleaming structures set in contrast to the colors and textures of the real world. The continuous monument was a vast, hypothetical structure that was meant to stretch across the entire globe, encompassing all of humanity within its walls. The structure was made up of a series of interconnected modules that were designed to house all of the basic needs and functions of human society, such as housing, transportation, communication, and leisure. One of the key ideas behind the continuous monument was the concept of the death of the object. Superstudio argued that the traditional focus on individual buildings and structures was limiting, and that architecture should instead be viewed as a continuous and interconnected system. Even the architect Rem Koolhaas got in on the action with his thesis project, Involuntary Prisoners of Architecture. In his version, set in London, the straight, linear layout of the city would mockingly fix the world's problems by trapping everyone inside of its grasp. One thing that I think this dystopian project illustrates is that linear cities offer residents almost no sense of choice. There are only two options for movement. They also limit choice in other ways as well. They require a high level of planning and coordination in order to be successful. They rely on the development of efficient transportation networks and the coordination of land use and zoning regulations. These types of projects can be a challenge to implement, to the point that it almost requires an authoritarian regime just to implement and control it. Kevin Lynch also continues to describe the misguided nature of linear cities. The separations, the oversimplification, the pure aesthetics of the working machine seem cold and repellent if we imagine ourselves actually living in these ideal places. They are founded on a conception of the city which seems basically wrong. If you're into designing your own city, whether just a dream, a dystopia, or something to actually build, you'll need a website. And the first step is to get a domain name, perhaps with a cool extension like .cool or .fail. Hover is the place to start and register your domain. How awesome would it be to have linearcities.fail? Then you can get an email address with a domain to look all official, and you could be the mayor at linearcity.fail. Once you register your domain with Hover, you can connect it with just a few clicks using the Connect feature. It makes it super simple and intuitive. And if you do happen to have any questions along the way, Hover is actually the best-in-class customer support team. You're not dealing with some giant faceless corporation. While you might not be dreaming of cities, building your online brand has never been more important. Your online identity begins with your domain name, and Hover has over 400 extensions to choose from to help brand yourself online. I'm assuming that some of you are designers. Given what we talk about here, you can actually use .design instead of using a generic .com or .biz. By using .design, you're actually telling everyone exactly what you do. New customers can get even an additional 10% off of any of the 400 plus domain extensions offered by going to hover.com/StewartHicks. Get your very own personal domain today. If you enjoyed this video, you might enjoy this other one about indoor cities and interior urbanisms. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps us out to deliver you bi-weekly videos on the built environment.